Damn it, Bird Jesus, I hate it when you do that. It's Thursday, February 27th, 2014. I'm Jimmy Principe.
I'm Sydney Foster.
And I'm Trey Comstock. Put in your final orders because this is Tech's Last Call, episode 65. Your last call for Tech News of the Week. Tonight, Jimmy goes to Barcelona. Sydney unlocks all the phones, but only one at a time. And I use fake bitcoins to buy pornography from GCHQ. We start tonight with the Mobile World Congress Mega Rundown Extravaganza of phones, phablets, and watches.
All right, everyone, hold on to your pants. It's going to be a bumpy ride here. All right, so this week, the tech press descended on Barcelona for Mobile World Congress, the show devoted to all things phones and tablets.
They do make more progress than actual Congress.
That's true. Yeah. The definition of progress is not Congress. I will here attempt to quickly run down all of the crazy gadget shenanigans that occurred. Probably not effectively. So if I missed something that you cared about, it wasn't important.
You were wrong.
Or Mark Zuckerberg said it.
Probably Mark Zuckerberg said it. So the most covered devices at the show by the tech press were those unveiled by Samsung, their next flagship phone, very predictably in a Balmer-esque naming convention called the Galaxy S5.
Hey, what's next year's phone going to be called?
It's probably going to be the S6, but we'll just have to wait and see. They also released an update to their smartwatch, the Gear 2, dropping the Galaxy naming convention, and the Gear Fit. So the S5 is a logical iteration of their flagship phone. I actually have a prototype, a 2-year-old prototype of the S5
You had a prototype?
here.
They never release prototypes.
It's right here. It has a different badge on the back. I don't know if you can see this on the video version. It says the S3.
3 lines. But if you look from the front, they're almost identical.
From the front, they look almost exactly the same.
Hey, Jimmy, I don't think that the S5 is a new phone because it doesn't look different.
So it turns out that looks can be deceiving because
really?
The S5 actually is a 5.1-inch screen, also 1080p, and they're giving it the newest Snapdragon processor, the Snapdragon 800 processor, 801 processor, I believe is what's in it.
Which is a quad core?
It's a quad core 2.3 gigahertz processor.
But still 32-bit.
Still 32-bit, that's correct. So other features offered by the phone that are slightly new are a fingerprint scanner. Tell me where you've heard that before.
But how is that fingerprint scanner integrated?
It's a small section of the screen at the bottom, and you kind of pass your finger. It's like the old fingerprint scanners on the laptops.
So it's not well integrated.
No, and kind of the opinion of it was it doesn't really work.
Tell me
about that.
How about that? Keep going.
It's in the sense that we thought that like the iPhone one wouldn't work, and then surprisingly it did.
It works amazing. It's amazing.
So there's a fingerprint scanner on the front, and then there's a heart rate monitor as part of the flash on the back, because why not? And
on my phone.
Yeah, because you need it.
So when I'm
Samsung says
holding it in my hand...
Okay, so I will demonstrate on the video. So the flash on the new one, it's this big bump kind of here on the back of the phone. So the idea is that when you're holding it, you can just like pass your finger over it and get your heart rate. Because massaging the back of your phone is what everyone does, right?
Well, if I'm holding my phone like this in the middle of vigorous activity... Maybe I want to check my heart rate.
So are you holding it with your left hand or your right hand during vigorous activity?
I would hold the phone with my right hand. During vigorous activity. For the record.
And on that note, it's time to end. Thank you. You can email us at podcast@textlastcall.com, facebook.com/textlastcall.
No, you can't stop the signal.
I can't stop the signal. I'm the producer of this show.
So the more interesting news, other than the iterative S5, was the new Gears. So Samsung totally and completely dropped the Galaxy naming convention with it. And along with that, they also dropped Android from them, opting for their in-house Tizen operating system for the devices. So the Gear 2 is a newer version of last year's Galaxy Gear, and that's basically all that you know about it.
Galaxy G-Tool, as I like to call it.
Yeah, well, now it is just, the Galaxy
It's now
G-Tool.
just the Gear 2. The more interesting one is the Gear Fit, which is it has a much more narrow and longer curved screen.
Yeah, curved OLEDs. It's cool. OLED or AMOLED?
I think it's OLED.
Yeah.
And it also has a heart rate sensor on the back of it. And
Yes.
the idea is that this is something you'd wear while you're exercising. And it has, they say it'll have 3 days of battery life instead of the one that the Gear had. Whatever. Really, the heart rate sensor is the big selling point of it because it is a fitness device, which, I mean, I can't think of anyone that would want that in a fitness device. Can you, Trey?
Hey, Jimmy, this may, minus the Tizen and the fact that it only works on 20 Galaxy phones or 20 Samsung phones, this is basically the exact device I have been yelling about for about a year and a half now. Pretty much.
Right.
Except it's not made by Apple, and I can't have any device that could possibly use it. But the principle's there, that this is actually what I'm looking for. Assuming it's all integrated in a reasonable way, this is looks much more put together than the Basis Band.
Yeah, the problem is that pricing and availability for the Samsung Gear things have not been announced. So it could cost $100, it could cost $500.
I've heard
knows?
people are kind of like Roger Chang over at CNET's kind of thinking $150.
That's
I've
kind
heard
of the
some
sweet
folks
spot
thinking
as well.
$100. But either way, like it's not going to be
people
like
want it to be $100.
Sure.
I think it'll be in the $150 to $200 range. I think it's more likely it's $200, and then the Gear
think?
2 will be $300, like the original Galaxy
yeah, but
Gear.
no one bought the G tool because it was partly because it was overpriced and underfunctioned.
Well, and also it
and battery
underfunctioned
life.
in the fact that it didn't have enough battery life to last for an entire day.
Or long enough for you to look at it.
All right, so we've already talked more about Samsung than I really want to. So continuing on, Sony showed off the Xperia Z2, another iterative product with a slightly larger screen at 5.2 inches from the 5-inch screen that they had last year on the Z1, and an upgraded processor. We also had HTC that introduced their new mid-range one-looking phone.
So they are committing to the strategy of getting out of the strictly premium market after their old strategy was to go solely into the premium market.
Look, they're freaking insane. I cannot explain their strategy.
Well, what they did they did 180 degrees. They were
Well, 'cause
going
they
in this
realized that-
direction, and then they went, oh, we used to have 1 million phones, and we made more money than we only had 2 phones. Let's go back to having 1 million phones.
Yeah. So now they have this phone. It's called the Desire 816.
Oh, God.
Because everyone desires 816. And it has an HD 5.5-inch screen, a 13 megapixel camera, and it's in a nice plastic. I'm reading on CNET, it's a satisfyingly plastic shell.
What did you
Whatever
say? It's
that-
unabashedly plastic?
It's unabashedly plastic. Thank you, Johnny Ive. I don't think they can call it that, though. I'm pretty sure that's trademarked. So LG, not to be outdone by all their other Asian phone competitors, which, by the way, also included ZTE and all kinds of other shenanigans. Huawei. They showed off a new G Pro called the G Pro 2.
GoPro
And
should sue them.
it also has a newer processor and a 5.9-inch screen.
Yeah.
So
So that's like
Now that-
that's like that big.
now that we've rounded out all of these wonderful phablets, the greater than 5-inch screens, let's talk about something a little more interesting. We finally have seen Nokia's new Android phones, the Nokia X, X Plus, and XL. The X and X Plus are both 4-inch screen phones with a 1 gigahertz Snapdragon processor and a GPS feature as well. And it's a cheap phone, 89 euros, which is off contract, which is $120
Wow.
American.
You know what that's not cheaper than?
Asha?
The cheapest Windows phone. That's not cheaper than the Lumia 510.
The Lumia 510 is not an. This is better spec wise than the Lumia 510.
Yes, but it's still running a vastly limited forked version of Android rather than full Windows Phone 8, which I would argue has more apps than a forked version of Android.
Yeah, it's not that much more expensive than the Lumia 510 though.
Right, but what I'm saying is, why would I buy in to this not full smartphone OS for the same price where I could buy into a full smartphone OS?
510 price.
Off contract.
I'm on GSM. All right, fact checking is the death of podcast. I will take your word for it. BlackBerry also had some new phones. the Z3 and the Q20, and
Yay.
I'm sure they're good phones, unlike their
Really?
parent company. So what do we think? Other than holy crap, that's a lot of phones.
I don't. Okay.
Did we see anything that moved us? Made us want to
Moved us?
twist and
Yes.
shout? I don't know.
Look, I am super excited about.
Exercise vigorously.
Yes. I have a watch that can help me measure my vigorous exercise, which is something I've been arguing for years. It's finally has the integration of a heart rate monitor and the software and the battery life to kind of actually be a fitness band that makes sense based on actual science. And what I look forward to the most is someone ripping off Samsung to the point where I can have this on either Windows Phone or iOS. But that, I mean, if you want to talk about what excites me, that's what excites me.
I also have yet to see a picture of it on someone's wrist, which is always...
You'll look like someone from Star
G-tool.
Trek.
You look like a G-tool.
Well, I mean,
obviously.
just looking at it, I mean, at least it doesn't have the same gigantic screen. Like
no,
the longer...
Go look at them side by side. It's still pretty huge.
But somehow the fact that it's stretched out rather than square, I mean, it's still huge, but it's pretty much the same size as the band, so that's not, I don't know, not quite as bad, I guess.
I think it looks all right. Okay, so I stand corrected. The Lumia 520 unlocked is $150 US.
So there, suck it.
So we're still $30 more when you're when you're playing in that kind of price range is actually meaningful. So
I mean,
sure,
it's 20% less.
yeah. I argue that you get a lot more for that $30, but
Yeah, but it's still
sure.
when
I
you're
mean,
talking about that price
when you're
range.
talking about that price range, $30, the new Firefox OS phones are quite literally $30. You could just buy Asha phone and
I didn't include that, the Firefox phones.
Yeah, well, because no one's going to buy them. But it's a fascinating...
They're interesting. They're interesting. They exist.
They exist.
There are Firefox
Hey, look,
phones.
it's a thing. But I honest to God, I don't think anyone's going to buy it. So it's, good luck to you, plucky other OS. It's kind of how I feel about Tizen. Great. Wonderful.
No, I don't actually feel that way about Tizen. I want you to crash and burn and bring Samsung down with you.
No, I want Samsung to switch over exclusively to Tizen and then push them up to C. Bye. Goodbye.
On the Google barge.
On the Google barge. That's what I want to happen. Because, look, people have been railing... I brought this up in the intro, but I want to go back to it. The people have been railing at Apple for years about how it doesn't come as a new phone unless you change the form factor. And then Samsung gives us a phone that looks almost identical year after year. And we're all like, oh, it's the new phone. And they don't ever get this isn't a new phone. Because
Since the S2, it's barely changed.
They've just increased the screen size marginally.
The S2 to the S3 was a change because the S2 was more boxy and the S3 was more curvilinear. But
the S2 looked more like an iPhone 3GS.
I wonder about the...
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just back to the silliness of having a heart rate monitor on the back of your phone.
No, yeah, on the back of your phone, I think it makes no sense.
Because why not? It's the same.
Because no one will use it at all. Like,
it doesn't even matter.
If your
They have a
phone-
translate tool in addition to Google's
phone
translate
is
tool.
in a case. Are they going to start making cases that have like a hole for
bump
your
bag.
heart rate monitor?
Well, you already have
and
phone.
who's running with their phone and they have it in a place where they're actually using the heart rate monitor? Like,
Trey, please don't make that motion.
That's
it's just silly.
I mean, people do hold their phones and run with them, and
They
that's
do.
what I'm mimicking.
Those people
the,
are not bright. They should
yeah,
get a case
but-
for their phone.
But the thing is that even cases for your phone leave a hole for the flash.
Right.
And the heart rate monitor and the flash are the same thing
That's
in this
true.
case. And so it would be exposed. Now, whether or not it'll work as well if you put like an OtterBox Defender case over it, yeah, probably not. But how many people are going to really use it? Probably not very many. This is one of those, they developed it for the Gear and went, well, we could put this on the phone. Why not?
But
Because it's unnecessary. Just because you can
Samsung-
doesn't mean you should.
that's totally against Samsung's philosophy. Samsung, at one point in history, maybe not anymore, had a device at every screen size from 2 to 70 inches. In almost every possible increment therein.
I'm glad Samsung
I
is
think
not
they
a fine
killed off the
dining
smaller.
restaurant. all I'm saying.
But no, I mean, it is total feature creep. It is total like, hey, let's just give it everything, and so we can go, we have this, and Apple doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Samsung, the S3 was one of the big phones that they started doing it on. Was the next big thing is already here ads.
Right.
They released the list of, so these are all the features of the Apple iPhone, and these are all the features of the Galaxy S3. And look, the S3 has like 10 times as many features as the iPhone. And they'd list stupid things like, S Voice.
Which no one wants, because Google Voice is better.
S Translate, and S this, and S...
So no duh doesn't have that.
S Run, and S...
S Shelf. S Health. Shelf.
So...
Look... Part of what makes Apple and Windows Phone, and specifically the Lumias, and the Nexus 5 so good, which is what our phone of the year for last year came down to, were those three devices, not because of number of features. None of those phones, save the Lumia 1020, had some killer, crazy standout feature. Right? What it was is how well all of those packages were integrated. And I think that's where Samsung always falls on its face, is that lack of integration. So it's just this crazy thing that you could use, but it's kind of glitchy. It doesn't really work. You wave your hand over the phone because your nails are drying, and...
So a lot of that stuff works. My biggest gripe with Samsung, and it's my gripe with the S3 specifically. So the S3 was a great phone when I got it, but once the S4 came out, Samsung pushed their software update from the S4 to the S3, which theoretically is supposed to be good, but what it ended up doing was, A, my battery life started to get so much worse. B, it had features
wasn't great
that
to begin with.
it was bad to begin with, and then it got worse. And B, I got all these features that I didn't even know were there until they would accidentally just be on, and like the split screen thing they added to the S3. But the S3 doesn't have the processing power to handle it.
Yeah. And
so you end up with a crippled experience on what was at the time when I got it, a 6-month-old device, to me, and a year old to consumers. You're just ruining your consumer experience, whereas Apple, they will not support a phone that does not run it well enough.
Right.
And they support phones for 3 years.
And they'll hold back on features until they think they're ready. Right? I mean, Apple will just ship without it. They are merciless.
Like NFC forever.
Like NFC to this day. Or Wi-Fi AC. Or 3G in the beginning, or LTE.
3G is a perfect, and the video capture,
and
the 3G could technically capture video, but they saved that feature for the 3GS,
where the processor got a lot better. So they have been kind of merciless in in avoiding feature creep. When they do add a feature, they make sure it is incredibly well integrated and functional. I think comparing the fingerprint scanners is a perfect thing. Samsung, kind of kludgy, barely works. iPhone, thought it was going to be kind of kludgy, thought it was going to barely work. And then I used it for 5 minutes. It was like, holy crap, this is useful. I used this. This works. It worked on my cat. It's great.
Please tell me that your cat still has a profile in your phone, Sydney.
Does he still have a profile?
No, I never set one up for the cat.
It works.
I remember the article, but I never actually tried that.
I'm disappointed.
Disappointed. I don't want the cat to go on my phone because he would spend all my money in the App Store. Let's be serious.
That's
Speaking
true.
of going online
the Friskies app
and spending all your money, Mt. Gox, formerly the world's largest Bitcoin exchange, has stopped all transactions indefinitely, finally responding to issues on how they handled Bitcoin transactions. This news has been kicking around the web for a while that Bitcoins were being lost in Mt. Gox transactions because they were falling through a known flaw in the Bitcoin system called transaction ID malleability. So I'm going to attempt to give you a few sentence breakdown of what that actually means.
Can you unpack that for me, Trey?
Yeah, I can. I did a lot of digging into what this means to try to be able to break it down into
Did you mine some Bitcoins while you were digging?
No, my graphics card's doing something else. Anyways, essentially, there are two ways of tracking Bitcoin transactions. A transaction ID, which is like a receipt number or a check number, okay? And then the public ledger that shows who owns what Bitcoin. And this is maintained kind of across groups of Bitcoin miners, this public ledger of what Bitcoin belongs where, okay? When a transaction is complete, its transaction ID will show up on the public ledger. However, a known flaw in the Bitcoin system allows an ID number to be changed after a transaction is complete. That's why it's transaction ID malleability. The transaction ID can be changed.
It's like changing bill numbers.
Right. So, and the problem that Mt. Gox is running into is Mt. Gox was only using the transaction ID to track Bitcoins rather than the public ledger. So you can imagine the scenario, right? You are A, you are sending Bitcoins to B. Okay? You approve a transaction, you get a transaction ID. Someone goes in and changes that transaction ID. You go to the public ledger, look to make sure your transaction was complete with B, see that it was incomplete. Or you don't see the transaction number show up because it's changed. And so you go, oh, maybe B didn't get it, or whatever. Now there are Bitcoins lost in the void. Actually, there are quite a few Bitcoins lost in the void. Mt. Gox only used the transaction ID to verify transactions. And so rather than going to the public ledger, and they have potentially lost $350 million worth of Bitcoins over 2 years that may have fallen through this gap. The wider Bitcoin community has slammed Mt. Gox, calling them a quote-unquote bad actor for not dealing with this issue that has been well documented since 2011. This is not some new hack thing. This has been a known theoretical problem with Bitcoin since 2011. Other exchanges have dealt with it. Mt. Gox has not. The US and Japanese governments have begun their own investigations, and the Mt. Gox CEO has been subpoenaed to appear in federal court. At the time of this recording, Bitcoin has fallen significantly to just around $500. There are some rumors that Mt. Gox may rise again as Gox.com under new leadership and presumably no longer vulnerable to transaction ID malleability. Either way, Mt. Gox is dead. Long live Mt. Gox. So, what are the implications of this for the future of Bitcoins, do y'all think?
This just contributes to the general image that I think a lot of people have of Bitcoins as being shady. When a prominent Bitcoin transaction company, or whatever you want to call them, is proven to be super shady. So that, I feel like, reflects negatively on the currency as a whole. It makes you, again, kind of makes people feel justified in thinking that Bitcoins are not a secure currency. Why would I trust that if the people who are in charge of these things are losing them?
Well, losing them, and there's no, like, FDIC for people to get their Bitcoins back. Right. Those Bitcoins are just gone. Millions of them. Millions of dollars worth of them.
If a bundle of Bitcoins falls off of a Mt. Gox truck on the internet, out of the Mt. Gox tube on the internet, where do they go?
We don't know.
We don't know where they went. Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. Eventually some little kid sees it down in a grate in the sewer and picks it back up again.
That's one theory. The other theory is it's actually the Mt. Gox folks that were skimming these things.
Right, and that's why they're being investigated.
That's part of why they're being investigated. That is a distinct possibility. They have gone on record saying that's not the case, but so did Chris Christie, and that's going to come out too. So, this part. Okay, we all need to repeat after me. Bitcoin is not a.
I don't like where this is going.
A currency. It's not a currency. It's a commodity.
Okay, Tom Merritt.
No. Currency.
She just stuck it to you.
I don't know how. It's not a currency. It is a means of exchange, yes, but it's a commodity. You buy it. It has no inherent value at all. It has only the amount of value you're willing to invest into it. Unlike a currency, which has a certain amount of innate value.
Well, but no, I disagree, because the U.S. currency does not actually have innate value because it's no longer backed by the gold standard.
It is still backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government.
Which is true, but it's not backed by the...
right, but I'm not talking about in exchange for a physical thing. But it has it has value in that it is tied to the full faith and credit of a country.
Let me
rephrase. Which Bitcoin is not.
There are really bad countries that have currency who have no faith or credit and are extraordinarily corrupt, but their money is still currency.
Right, so, just not particularly valuable currency.
Bitcoin is the currency of the internet, which, let's be serious, is a really bad as far as like faith and credit. So it's going to go through these kinds of crazy fluctuations because the internet, surprise, surprise, is not actually a stable thing. There are crazy people on the internet.
There are crazy people on the internet
that can do things like this very easily.
Right.
If the means of exchanging bitcoins is not well protected.
Well, I mean, Mt. Gox just basically opened up a huge door saying, hey, here's this thing we've known about for almost 3 years. Come and take advantage of it. Go ahead. Do it. Go to town.
Sorry we were too lazy to bother to deal with this problem.
Well, because up until recently, it was mostly theoretical. Like, people knew this was like a theoretical problem, and no one did anything. And then, or like Mt. Gox didn't do anything. Other exchanges took care of the problem. Mt. Gox didn't. Mt. Gox was the biggest, and it didn't seem to matter. And then Bitcoin started going missing at quite a rate, and people started to get a little worried, and then Mt. Gox died. And took a lot of people's Bitcoins, commodities, with them.
See, I'm still not convinced it's a commodity. I think that it has the right idea to be a currency.
Currency implies a lot of things that Bitcoin currently is not. For instance, it's very difficult to buy most things with Bitcoins, which is kind of a key aspect of being a currency. So a currency is generally something you can exchange for widely for goods and services, which generally speaking you can't with Bitcoins. Also, currencies tend to be backed by something. The full faith and credit of a country, generally speaking, or a conglomeration of countries in the case of the euro. And they're tied together, and they're exchanged together, and there's a whole bunch of mechanisms that go into being a currency. There's a whole bunch of things you can do with being a currency that give them a certain amount of innate value. Bitcoin has no innate value. Like, the Tom Merritt analogy is baseball cards or Pokemon cards. Okay? They're like that. I could, on the playground, occasionally exchange Pokemon cards for things, goods or services, that I may or may not have required in elementary school and middle school.
Vigorous activity.
Like vigorous activity. But that doesn't make it that does not make it a currency. That does make it a means of exchange, which is what a commodity is. Commodity is a means of exchange. You have X amount of this thing, and you can trade it for X amount of Y thing. That's a commodity. As opposed to a currency, which is something that is legal tender to act as value, which in 99.999% of cases, Bitcoin is not. You can donate to Twit. You can buy drugs. You can buy drugs. You can.
Isn't there somewhere you can buy coffee with Bitcoin?
Hits.
You can order hits. You can order vigorous activity in all of its many forms. There's some things you
don't have
can.
to use Craigslist.
Right. You could probably use it in some...
You can do it all through the Tor browser.
There's like one cop that gets paid in Bitcoin. In some... Look,
Mountain View.
It's just not... It's just not actually a currency. It's just not. And Mt. Gox screwed up bad, and people lost a lot of stuff.
Well, and it's going to hurt. It's going to take a while for Bitcoin. So if Mt. Gox has found that they were stealing Bitcoins from then Bitcoin, I think, is just kind of hosed permanently. However, if that's not the case, and it was just that Mt. Gox was...
being lazy.
Opened up the safe door
forgot to close the safe door.
Forgot for 2 years.
I think neglected to, maybe.
This is
They're
essentially your bank opening up the safe door and going, meh. That's what this is. Like, this is. You want to talk about it as a currency? This is the safe door is open. We know it's open. It's been published on the internet that it's open. Then and how it's open and how you enter
no
it.
one finds these things
But
on.
no one is gonna
there's
do
no
it.
people there.
Like, it's mostly theoretical that someone could steal it.
It's like a one-horse town. You know, it's mostly theoretical that there's people there.
Right. And yet, $350 million worth of Bitcoin may be potentially missing. Someone made a lot of money off of this.
It was the cat.
Possibly. So, something else that I might make a lot of money on is something Congress may have actually passed.
Good news!
Is it the Dacia Sandero?
It's not the Dacia Sandero.
I'm disappointed.
Sorry. But your phone is almost your own again. Yes, that's true. You can almost actually do what you want with your own darn phone.
But it is mine. I don't
Sort
understand.
of. Yeah, well, you don't count. So this past Tuesday, the United States House of Representatives passed the, as always, creatively named Unlocking Consumer Choice and Wireless Competition Act.
What's that acronym?
You figure
Train
it out.
wreck.
Let me know. So this act gives at this point still bill, gives consumers the right to unlock our phones to be used with different wireless carriers. And it undoes the prior Library of Congress decision that declared phone unlocking illegal under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. But the Unlocking Consumer Choice and Wireless Competition Act is not without its slightly problematic stipulations. So the particular stipulation that has many consumer advocates concerned is a statement that was added to the bill that says that the bill does not allow unlocking, quote, for the purpose of bulk resale. And your initial impression may be, well, why is that a problem? I'm one person. I need to unlock one phone. I don't care. But consumer advocates take the position that this provision unfairly regulates resellers of unlocked phones. So basically, these people buy the phones, they unlock them, they sell them. That's a legitimate business practice, and Congress has...
Gazelle.
Right. Basically,
sure, exactly like
Congress
Gazelle.
has, no reason to regulate these or to prevent these people from conducting what is a legitimate business practice. And then also, would limit businesses that unlock phones for consumers. So basically, now if you want your phone unlocked, you have to deal with your wireless carrier, which can possibly be a problem for you. So it basically, that having that provision in there keeps this bill from really fully addressing the problems with that Library of Congress decision. So having now passed the House, the bill will be moving on to the Senate. So we'll just have to watch and see how the story develops, if any changes are made. But in the meantime, do we see the current progress of the bill as good news for consumers? Or is this simply just a slight dent in what is still a fairly significant blockade to consumer rights in the wireless sector?
I mean, I think it's good news, but it's certainly not as far as we want them to go. Mm-hmm. Because realistically, if you're going to allow people to unlock their phones, you should not stipulate, but you can't do it on a massive scale. That's not allowed. I should be able to sell my my S5 prototype to Gazelle, and Gazelle should be able to say, okay, well, we have all these S5 prototypes. Let's unlock all of them and resell all of them as unlocked phones. There should be no, well, I have to go and unlock my phone and send it to them unlocked for them to be able to sell it.
Sure.
That's
yes.
just one of those, that should not be any difference.
True. But this is at least a step forward.
No, it's definitely a
we
step
just
in the
didn't
right
get everything
direction.
we wanted. It's funny, we went from not really being able to unlock our phones at all to now we can, and I think we need to take a moment and go, hey, that's good.
Good job, Congress.
Really, I get we're the press and we're critics and all of that, but I want us to take a step back here. Look at her life. Look at her choices.
Betray.
Yes, but generally speaking, if I wanted to buy the phones that I use, that's not a financially viable option.
By the way, for those of you that are not on the video show, I just held up my Nexus 5
Nexus
as an
5.
example.
Look, I mean, the Nexus, that's one of the reasons we've rated the Nexus 5 as highly as it is specs for price. Absolutely. And if everyone was priced like the Nexus 5...
It's designed as an unlocked phone. It's not designed to be a subsidized phone as far as pricing.
It's designed to be free.
Sure.
For the masses.
My point is, if I was, when I bought
This phone you cannot chain.
the Lumia 1020, it would have been $750 unlocked. If I would buy my iPhone unlocked, it'd be $650 unlocked.
Yeah, see, with the $750 unlocked for the Lumia 1020, feels like shenanigans because the 1520 was $700 unlocked.
Yeah, but that tells you what's actually pricing those phones, and it's not screen. It's sensor. I mean, Lumia 1520 has half the sensor of the 1020. There's an impressive
sensor in the 1020.
It's crazy. I mean, the 1020 is still more expensive than the 1520 on contract on AT&T. You can get the 1520 for $100. You cannot get the 1020 for $100. Or you couldn't last time I looked. For the longest time anyways. You could... The 1520 was more expensive than the 1020 was more expensive than the 1520.
Even though it was 6 months older.
6 months older and had a much smaller screen. Because screen size is not what's driving costs.
Less powerful processor and all those
things.
No.
They're the same. No, they did upgrade the processor in the 15.
The 1520 has the same processor as the Nexus 5.
Wonderful. Probably helps with battery life. I mean, look, I like the 1020. I have no knocks against it. But anyways, neither of those
are unlocked. They're really expensive unlocked.
Right. Prohibitively expensive.
It's also why I didn't get an HTC One Google Play edition because it's $600 unlocked.
Right. So basically, what this will allow is for us to get our phones unlocked once we finish our contracts. Great. Wonderful. That would be really useful because then I can just convert my Lumia 1020 into my world phone in a year and a half. Great. Useful. I can stop buying burner phones in every country. This feels like progress in my life, and I can just keep my email synced across. I have like a box of burner phones here in my house of of all the different burner phones that I've had to pick up over the years. So this will be great that I can just have one phone that is just the phone that I drop SIM cards into, and Lumia 1020 is perfect for that. It's it's going to work on all the necessary bands. Wonderful. Good job. So the government may have done like a good job in actually passing something that we can find useful, but then they did something really troubling. That is this week's last call. So, okay. It's not often that a Edward Snowden leak makes it into our, vaguely humorous last call section, but this one...
Whoa. Watch your misspeak.
But this one actually involves, what the internet is truly for, which is...
Kittens?
Pornography.
It's really, really great.
For porn.
Not
yes.
Cats.
In a British GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters, project called Optic Nerve, released by Edward Snowden, bulk webcam feeds from Yahoo Chat were captured. This isn't targeted for people they were looking for. This was everybody. Okay?
All of the people.
So you might be able to see where this is going. Rather than capture the entire feed, which would be prohibitive, the security agency pulled one still image per webcam every 5 minutes. Apparently, Yahoo Chat was known to be used by a number of people that GCHQ were tracking, and so they pulled this data in and analyzed it. Yahoo isn't really happy about this. In a statement to the Guardian, they stated, "We were not aware, nor would we condone this reported activity. This report, if true, represents a whole new level of violation of our users' privacy that is completely unacceptable, and we strongly call on the world's governments to reform surveillance law law consistent with the principles we outlined in December. Okay, so this is awful and constitutes a new level of government spying where they quite literally invade your bedroom.
Hello, Internet.
As some of the leaked documents state, unfortunately, it would appear that a surprising number of people use webcam conversations to show intimate parts of their body to other persons. Also, the fact that Yahoo software allows for more than one person to view a webcam stream without necessarily sending a reciprocal stream means that it appears sometimes to be used for broadcasting pornography. Apparently, around 7% of captured feeds involve quote-unquote undesirable nudity. End quote. So, they try to surface and analyze only feeds where the facial recognition data that they're running on this detects a face, but it sounds like that doesn't work all the time.
Oh, God.
So, like, there's all these wonderful warnings in the GCHQ documentation. It's like, look, you may see porn. Just warning you, if it makes you uncomfortable. You may see objectionable material that you may find uncomfortable. So what this sounds like to me is, in short, does this mean that they are being rewarded or punished for their spying?
I'm
Both.
still hung up on the
Either?
Undesirable nudity.
Do they have a category for desirable nudity
Well,
as
see,
well?
they rank them on a scale from 0 to 10.
Also, seriously, they're surprised by this?
7%.
That's
Yeah.
pretty high.
And
I'm
it's
surprised at the
it's
percentage.
7% with a margin of error of 3.7. So it may be as high as 11 or as low
I
as
still
3.
think that it's naive to be surprised by that.
This is a government report. Their goal was to, like, capture, store, and subject it to facial recognition. They weren't expecting to see a lot of dongs.
Well,
And then they
don't
did.
know much about the internet.
And then they
do
saw,
they?
like, 7% of the feeds were somebody's some form of junk. And that... Look, if I was sitting, you can picture, like, you've seen the Bond movies, right? So these, like, really sterile, futuristic offices where everything's, like, really super clean and, like, clear plastic, and you're wearing, like, a neatly pressed, starched European suit that's tight-fitting with your tie, that's folded with a big knot, and, you know, you're very neat, you're very proper, and you are sitting there watching someone, you know, essentially having sex on the
Well,
internet.
guess
for
what?
money.
I don't feel bad for you. I feel bad for the person whose privacy
Yeah.
you're invading, so too bad.
I mean,
get
quite
over
frank-
yourself.
Quite frankly, this story is only funny because of the subject matter it entails. It's not actually funny. It's deeply troubling.
It's very troubling, but it's funny that they're surprised that they found porn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're seeking videos on the internet, 7%
I
of the
went on the
time
internet
you will find
and I
porn.
found this.
Yeah, it's exactly like, oh, well, look, and like...
I'm
this-
sorry, one of my high school students explained to me the other day, now you know one of the rules of the internet is if it exists, there's porn of it, right?
Rule 34.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, if a high school student knows it, I think they should probably know it too.
Look, I mean, essentially, the NSA just fell victim... The GCHQ just fell victim to Rule 34. If it exists, there is porn of it. Think of anything you cherish. Think of anything you love. Any character, any cartoon character from when you were a child. Anything at all. Then realize there's pornography based on it. Just understand that. Smurfs?
Internalize it,
Yep.
accept
Internalize
I
it,
don't
accept
like
it.
Smurfs, they're creepy.
Okay, what's a cartoon you like?
Nope.
See, yeah, it's deeply
It's a
disturbing.
slippery slope.
Yes, and on that note, we need to get out of here. If you have any feedback, regardless of that comment, podcast at textlastcall.com, facebook.com/textlastcall, pinterest.com/textlastcall, or at textlastcall on the Twitters. Assuming we haven't been banned, we'll be seeing you on the interwebs.
This is not the nudity show, that's the other one.
We do what we want.
Don't tell me my business, general woman. I'll do what I want.
Nudity is everywhere.
So show title, GCHQ fell victim to Rule 34. Most of our audience will
I
not
think
get
the show
that.
title should be Too Many Cats, because that was a very feline-heavy episode.
Indeed.
Bye. Bye, internet.
You will always be my favorite internet friends.